Hey, thanks for checking out Johnny Builds. This week I'm going to show you how I built this queen-size modern platform bed with a reading light built into the headboard, all for around $300 using materials I got at the home center. Let's get started. Most of this bed is constructed with pine, and the main platform is made from 3 2x10s. Here I'm cutting off the rounded edges on both sides, and the finished width is about 8 1/4 inches. Next I ripped the rounded edges off of 5 2x4s, and these got cut down to 3 inches wide. I ripped one of these boards in half, and this will be used for the top platform piece. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a little bit. Next I cut the 2x10s down to their final dimensions over on the miter saw. I planed these boards down to save time sanding later. And I had a little snipe on the first pass, so here I'm using a scrap board to prevent this. These platform boards will get butt joined together, and the longer ends will cover up the shorter middle plank. So here I'm adding pocket holes to the shorter plank and one pocket hole on each end of the skinnier top board. I started assembling the platform by clamping the ends to my workbench, and I used a speed square to make sure the ends lined up properly. And then each side got attached with 5 pocket screws. And here the skinnier top piece gets attached with 1 pocket screw on each side. Next I planed the 4 2x4s that will be used for the base of the platform. Again, this makes the sanding process go much quicker later on. I sanded each board at the 220 grit, and then I lined the first 2x4 up along the bottom of the platform. I used the joining piece to mark the length, and then this piece got cut over on my miter saw. And I just repeated this process of laying out and marking each piece, working my way around the rest of the platform. I added pocket holes to the base and spaced these about every 8 inches along the bottom. I attached the base to the platform using pocket screws and used a couple clamps to keep everything lined up. I attached the last 2x4 to the skinny top piece, and once you do this, the bed is pretty sturdy at this point. The platform of this bed is pretty big, and I had to flip it over on my workbench, and here you can see that was not the easiest task. Now I could sand the top of the platform and flush up the joining pieces with my orbital sander. And here I sanded the rest of the platform up to 220 grit. I used sandy ply for the headboard, and here I am breaking down the panel with my track saw. I ripped down the length of the headboard over on my table saw and cut notches on both ends to match the platform. For the headboard frame, I used a couple more 2x4s that had been ripped down to 3 inches. Then I cut a 3/4 inch rabbet on each headboard piece to match the thickness of the plywood. Next I milled this 4x4 down to 3 inches square. And this is the stock I use for the leg pieces. I used my tapering jig and cut a small taper on each side. And here are the 4 bed legs after I cut them down to 6 inches. I moved on to the top piece of the headboard that the LEDs will be housed on, and here I'm cutting a dado in the center of the board where it overhangs. I made this cut in 2 passes because that's a lot of material to remove all at once. I used a slot cutting bit on my router table to cut a slot the length of the dado. I cut strips of acrylic to fit in the headboard, and I had to cut 4 of these strips because all I had was this 2-foot section of acrylic. And here I'm test fitting one of the pieces in the slot to make sure it doesn't bind up. I tried using a glass frosting spray, but I had to add a light coat of white spray paint so the lights wouldn't be visible when they are turned off. I moved the bed inside and laid out the headboard frame pieces, and I marked this board at the top so it joins the next piece similar to the construction of the platform. Next, I attached the 2 side pieces of the headboard with brad nails, and I didn't use any glue on the main structure of this bed so it could be taken apart if I needed to move it. With a little help, I measured out the length of the top frame, and then I took this out to the shop and cut it over on the miter saw. I laid the headboard face down on the floor and set in the top frame piece. I used a Forstner bit to drill a hole so the LED switch could come out the back. Next, I cut and attached 4 corner braces, which adds to the overall strength and gives the bed legs more room to attach to. Here I'm showing you one of the end caps I made to hold the acrylic in place once it's installed. I installed the LED light strip and I ran this along both edges of the inside of this slot, and I'll leave a link to the lights I use in the description below. I slid in the acrylic panels and glued on the end caps. I attached the dimmer switch and plugged it in for a little test run. I glued in a wood scrap to plug up the top of the headboard end pieces, making sure to match the grain orientation, and then I used my flush cut saw to trim away the excess. I pulled the LED connector plug through the hole I drilled earlier and used brad nails to attach the top headboard piece. And then I stapled this wire in place so it couldn't be pulled out. I attached mounting boards to each bed leg using 4 screws each. And next I applied a dark walnut Danish oil to the legs. Then I ripped a 2x4.5 to serve as the cleats on both sides of the frame that the slats will rest upon. And then I mounted these cleats to each side of the frame using screws. Here I'm applying Danish oil to the headboard, and then I lifted this up and attached the headboard to the top of the frame. Each side got 2 screws, and then I added 6 more screws along the bottom. All the legs get rubber feet, and then I attach these to the corners of the frame with 5 screws each. I used some spacer blocks to attach the slats, and then I cut down some 1/4-inch plywood to cover them all up. Hey, thanks for stopping by Johnny Builds. I really love the way this bed turned out with its clean lines and its built-in LEDs. And if you liked it as well, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment down below. And if you want to see what I'm working on next, go ahead and subscribe and follow me on Instagram @JohnnyBuilds. And I'll have a build article for this bed up on my website. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you back here next time.